minutes now our time in Castries and across St. George's, Grenada as well. Stay with us. Up next, the newly elected Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, will join us live on Beyond the Headlines.
I, Deacon Amos Thomas Mitchell, do swear that I will faithfully execute the office of Prime Minister without fear or favor, affection or ill will, and that in the execution of the functions of that office, I will honor, uphold, and preserve the Constitution of Grenada, so help me God. And forgive me if I acknowledge my grandmother,
Prime Minister of Grenada, Caribou, Billy Martin, Dickon Mitchell.
Bright, broad smiles on the face of the newly elected Prime Minister on that day of his swearing-in just about some 40 days ago. He's gotten down to business, and it is an honor and privilege to be granted this opportunity to interview the newest Prime Minister, the newest elected Prime Minister here in the Caribbean region, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell. Producers, please, the script is on screen, and you should be following me at this time. 5 minutes now after 8 o'clock our time. Prime Minister Mitchell, for many, presents a new and fresh perspective for transformational leadership in the Caribbean region. The call for good governance has gathered momentum among citizens across the globe, and certainly in the Caribbean. We witnessed in the Arab Spring movement just over a decade ago, and more recently the act of people power, when the disgruntled people of Sri Lanka marched on the official residence of the nation's president and took over the president's official residence, treating themselves to the lavish lifestyle he enjoyed, far from their reality. Grenada has had its political history and experience. Recall the Mongoose gangs under the dictatorship of Eric Gray, and in more recent time, the Grenada Revolution and subsequent assassination of Prime Minister Maurice Bishop. The country has since settled into a stable democratic system, holding successive free and fair elections. On the 17th of June, exactly 5 weeks and 5 days ago, 40 days and 40 nights, Grenadians elected a young, charismatic leader who many see as a hope for transformational leadership within the region, a fresh perspective in regional leadership. Prime Minister Honorable Dickon Amos Thomas Mitchell, we welcome you to St. Lucia's newest current affairs television show. Sir, good morning from St. Lucia.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning to all of your listeners, and a special good morning to the citizens of St. Lucia. I was in St. Lucia not too long ago. Sorry I couldn't stay longer, but I enjoyed the short time I was there.
Right, and thanks for accepting the invitation. Thanks for coming on. And we say good morning to our viewers in Grenada as well. We have quite a good following of Grenadians who follow the show online via the Facebook platform. So good morning to our friends in Grenada. Prime Minister, just like you, we are new, and we bring a fresh perspective again towards providing answers and nurturing real change for our people. We are indeed pleased to have you join us. For us, symbolizing the notion of oneness among the people of the Caribbean. We know that many are looking forward with eagerness to this interview. So let's get right down to it. Prime Minister, we know you were born in humble beginnings, sir. To a working class mother and father in Petite Esperance, St. David. The story is that you started off in a home where there was no pipe-borne water, and your childhood days did not have the luxury of a shower. Your sister, I'm told, on many occasions she was responsible for bathing you right in front of that house in a bucket of water. I see the smile on your face. Memories for you. How much does those humble beginnings and that humble reality of your past add to shaping your outlook and your approach for leadership as the Prime Minister of Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique?
Well, I think my humble beginnings remains with me. I still view myself as a very humble person. I think humility is a virtue that serves all of us well, regardless of the position or the high office you may hold. At the end of the day, the office of Prime Minister is an office meant to serve the people of Grenada, and service requires humility. If you are not humble, you may let the office and the trappings of the office get to you. And there's a clear distinction between the office of the Prime Minister and me as a person. And that office is an office you serve for a limited time, and then someone else will take the job. And obviously, you have to go back to what I would call your normal prime ministerial life. And I think that lesson has to remain with us. But above and beyond that, I think there are other aspirational lessons that you can take, which is regardless of the circumstances that you come from, with the right values, the right attitude, and hard work, nothing is beyond you. And so, to that extent, for me, I wanted to serve as a lesson for other persons who may find themselves in what we call humble circumstances. And usually we tend to ascribe humble circumstances with lack of material luxuries. But, in a sense, I have no regrets about my childhood. If I had to do it all over again, I would probably do it the same way, because it was a fun childhood. I had a lot of friends growing up. I never really wanted for anything. And at that time, I certainly didn't consider myself to be deprived or poor. Because essentially you had food, even though there was no running water in the house. We still had access to water in the village. You had the beaches, the rivers. So most of the things you really need to survive in life was readily available in the village. And most of all, you had your family and your friends.
Excellent way to jump off this conversation, I think, taking us back to your early days. Many in the Caribbean today feel delusional and hopeless. There is desire among our citizens in the Caribbean for government that delivers, government that engenders people participation, government that brings benefits to all, in particular the underprivileged, government that operates based on the principles of justice, equity, accountability, transparency, and not least a government that understands that governance is about service. What is your reflections to these values and standards, and how much value do you place on people participation and engagement in the process of governance?
I think that's really the highest value, people's participation in the process of governance. We are democracy, and that is what fundamentally underpins our system of governance, our constitution, and our political way of life. So to that extent, I think our campaign, for instance, was different from traditional campaigns of the past. Our campaign was focused on engaging with our citizens and ensuring that our citizens crucially had the opportunity to engage with us and speak to us. Now, traditionally, you have rallies where the politicians or the candidates get on a stage and simply spew their view as to how the country should or shouldn't be run, or attack the opponents or the adversary. The approach we took was to have town hall meetings where we presented some of the programs we wish to discuss. And I say discuss with the citizens because you need to have citizens buy-in. And we gave the citizens an opportunity to comment, question us, to give us advice and counsel. And all of our pocket meetings reflected a similar pattern. And we felt that resonated with the population because it truly gave them an opportunity to take part in the pre-election and the election process. Now, crucially, we've undertaken to our citizens that we will be coming back to our citizens every quarter at least to report on our stewardship, to report on our governance, and to engage in the same town hall style meetings, to give them the opportunity again to take part, to participate, to question us, to query us, to give advice, etc. Finally, I would say you may or may not be aware, but we've launched a portal where we've invited our citizens to submit their expressions of interest in serving on the various government entities and state-owned boards or statutory bodies that we have in Grenada, which to a large extent is responsible for delivering a lot of the government services to our citizens. And we've opened that up because traditionally our perspective is that it's been the same set of people over and over for the last several years, if not decades, who've manned these boards and therefore shaped the policies. And so we really want to give the public and persons who hitherto didn't have that chance to get an opportunity to serve. So that is testimony to our commitment to people's participation in the process.
Absolutely. And I have a question for you specifically on that approach to invite your citizens. particularly the young people, to serve on those boards. You did that in the very first hours of you being sworn in. And I think it's extremely commendable that you set out that target every quarter to come back and engage your citizens on matters of interest to them, because you appreciate, and from where you sat before, where you sit now, there was always a disconnect between the campaign and getting into office. There seemed to have been a disconnect between the individuals and the citizenry once you have left the campaign trail and you're sworn in and going to office. So definitely commendable. We followed your campaign ahead of the recent polls. I think it would have been difficult for any citizen across the OACS not to follow that campaign because of the level of energy and freshness that you brought, defining and charismatic in your approach. Your party was focused on messaging and outlining the NDC's plans and policies. As you said, departure from the norm. In many of our territories, the campaigns descend into personal attacks and the malparler, the mépris. Was that approach representative of a particular philosophy?
Certainly, it is for me and for a party, and I'm saying this, to some extent in the past. I think our party also made the mistake of sometimes not focusing on the issues, but in a sense attacking our adversary or opponent. So it was very important for me, upon joining the party, to set the right tone that we are going to be different and that we are going to focus on the issues and the programs and the solutions, identifying the challenges we face and how do we bring solutions to them, making sure that our people are part of that process. I don't see how you can convince someone that you can govern or that they should give you the opportunity to govern if all you do is spend your time attacking or criticizing someone else. Because essentially you are not saying I can govern because of the programs I have or the platforms or the solutions I'm bringing. You are probably just simply saying I don't like the other person who's holding office. And in our case, given the history of our party and the fact that we had lost the last two elections devastatingly, the approach of criticizing the incumbent Prime Minister and his team, in my view, was counterproductive, because obviously that didn't work the last two elections. Obviously, the public voted them in. And so the starting point for me was, well, this is democracy. You have to respect the views of the population. If they voted in a party into office twice and to the point where they've given them all of the seats, your strategy has to be able to say to the public, they have been in power for the last 9 or 8 or 10 years. What have you gotten for the vote and the confidence you've shown in them? And I think if there was going to be criticism, the criticism had to be focused on what are the things we can do better, what are the things we ought to do better, and what are the standards we should be raising. And so the focus then was really on not just identifying those issues, but then saying what are the solutions to them. And to that extent, we were really laser focused on messages that dealt with solutions or that dealt with the challenges we face and how we can overcome them. And I think if we focus more on that, politics, both political spectrums or parties, then we would be doing our country and our citizens a huge favor by ensuring that we focus on the right thing and that we can therefore find solutions to help develop our islands.
Interesting perspective. So now at a time when many in the region yearn for a government that is transformational and forward thinking, again, my technicians, please let us stay focused. Please let us stay focused at 16 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock. What are some of the key values that would guide the operations of your government during this first term of office?
Well, I think, let me start by saying we campaign on a programmatic platform of change, transformation, in which we identify clearly some of the things we wish to achieve during our term in office. And so it's very crucial for us to focus on that. Our job is to deliver the things that we said we would deliver. So we are very, very keen on ensuring that we can identify those issues within our manifesto that are absolutely key to beginning the transformation process, and that we in fact accomplish those goals that we've set within the time frame. Some of them are medium term, some of them are short term, some of them are long term. And measuring our performance is going to be absolutely key. But it's not just self-measurement. Obviously, the public is going to have to measure our performance as well, which is part of the reason why we'll be going back to them. But we are very keen on ensuring that our permanent secretaries, the public service, understands that we came into office with a particular mandate on a particular platform, and that we explain to them via consultation, via discussions, via retreats, that this is the agenda we came on and this is the agenda that we're sticking to. So that's one. Two, we really have to take a yes we can do attitude to our overall development rather than finding excuses. And so it's very important, I think, that we educate ourselves on the fact that once mankind sets sights on goals and it works relentlessly towards them, that you will overcome the challenges and the difficulty of the circumstances that you have. Three, we really have to invest in our people, and that means our education system really has to be overhauled. There is no point in for the pretending that our education system is serving our needs as well as it ought to. And so when we talk about the need to retooling, to focusing on skills training, to focusing on digitization, to focusing on the information age, and giving our young people in particular the skill set required to allow them to function in the 21st century and to grow and thrive and become citizens of the world, that is going to be a major focus for us. The other issue that is of significance, not just for us, but throughout the region, is the question of our food security. I think all of the various shocks from hurricanes to pandemics demonstrate clearly that we have to make a greater effort of growing our own food, securing our own food, so that the well-being of our people can be protected. Now, we often talk about transparency and good governance as buzzwords, but we actually have to have a discussion as to what does that actually translate to? What does that mean? And why is it there's a perception of corruption, real or imagined? Why does corruption take place? And what are the things we need to do to minimize corruption and to be able to demonstrate to our citizens the negative impact of corruption on our development and why it is important to put systems in place to root that out. But it requires an honest conversation, and I'll give an example. In Grenada, government ministers' salaries, in my view, are woefully inadequate. And what that means is that you almost create a situation where people are vulnerable, and therefore you find a situation where the corruption and so on could happen easily. Because if you're going to give persons a very demanding job to do, and there's no doubt that being a government minister or an MP is a demanding job, and then the state provides little or no or very inadequate resources to allow them to do that job, then you're almost facilitating the process where people are going to be weak, be vulnerable, and they find themselves making decisions that they should not do. However, if you create an environment where persons are paid well, they're given the resources, then you certainly would be minimizing the risk of corruption. And if it does happen, then there certainly should be dire consequences for them because they would have no excuses. So those are some of the issues that I think we really need to tackle, some of it on a medium term, some of it short term, but some of it also on a long term basis.
Yeah, thanks for that. During your swearing in, Prime Minister, you vowed to end nepotism and to reform the electoral process. You also stated, and if you allow me, I quote, we would not move forward as a people if appointments to key government institutions, boards, and other services were done on a party loyalty basis. If you believe in serving your country and you have the skills, we need you. Adding, we need fresh faces with innovative ideas driven by the common desire to make our place a better place. Recently, we note of an advertisement that you spoke of earlier, inviting persons to come in and serve on the various boards, submit their CVs. I think it's the first time we've seen an advertisement like that across the Caribbean. So definitely historic. Describe the thinking and the process here, as well as the outlook with regards to the electoral reform and the onslaught against nepotism.
Right. Well, let me say this. When we talk about opening up our government and people's participation, the advertisement inviting persons to offer to serve on government entities, state-owned enterprises, statutory bodies, it's just part of that process. You can't have a situation where one group of people for several decades serve these institutions and the rest of the community, the rest of the villages, the rest of the parishes are locked out. Because in effect, what you're suggesting is that governance is only for one group of people. And you are educating your citizens to do what? You're educating them to serve, to help build the communities, to help build the society. So we think it's imperative. In the case of Grenada, we have almost 40 to 60 various statutory bodies, government-owned enterprises, etc., ranging from both sizes of 4 to 5 to, in some cases, 10 to 12. And we think it's imperative that we allow citizens who are not necessarily involved in politics, because we can't all be politicians or be members of political organizations, but who have the skill set, the knowledge and the temperament, and crucially, the intent to make the organizations better and to make our country better, to give them the opportunity to serve. And so we felt it important to openly let them know that was our policy, and that we are welcoming them to do so. Now, of course, you have a finite number of these boards. We've gotten as much as 1,600 applications thus far within a week. So that tells you that I think, both from within and outside of Grenada. So that tells you that there is an eagerness to serve, and that people are prepared to volunteer their time to help build the nation, and by extension, build the institutions that will build the nation. So we see it as a very, very, very positive thing. I think the reaction is obviously very overwhelmingly positive. The approach we are seeking to do is to have boards reflect youth, women. Obviously, we want experienced persons. We want senior citizens, middle-aged persons. We want the boards to properly reflect our society. But crucially, we want to ensure that the boards are staffed with people who have the competence and the capacity to enhance the delivery of the services that these entities are meant to do. And you note in our advertisement, we indicated, for example, that if persons do wish to serve, that we would want them, specifically for boards that you're offering to serve as a director, that we would want you to agree to become an accredited director within a year of being offered if you are not, and that we are prepared to pay for this, so that our citizens are properly trained on their fiduciary duties as directors of state-owned entities. Because too often in the past, persons who serve these boards misunderstand that their role as directors is really to enhance the performance of the management of the entities, and thereby enhance the performance of the entities overall. And sometimes you find the board directors themselves descend into becoming managers. All kinds of corrupt practices occur, and then the entities end up failing. And by extension, the taxpayers suffer, because it's either the taxpayers' dollars that are used to bail them out repeatedly, or in many cases, they fail to deliver the services on behalf of the taxpayers. Right? Go ahead. Now, I was saying in terms of electoral reform, the truth is we have to make our electoral process one that is friendly to the voter, and one that makes it easy for the voter to cast his ballot. We have a representation of the People's Act that has been amended several times. It has not been consolidated. It makes it very difficult for lawyers, much less the average citizens, to have a clear sense of what are the electoral rules. And we've had, for example, a situation where the law makes no reference to expiry dates on our voting ID cards, yet still the cards have an expiry date. So if you got a card in 2010, for example, the card expired in 2020, and you then had to go back and re-register and basically engage in the same process you engaged in 10 years ago, which is bring your birth certificate, bring your ID, get fingerprinted, put back in all of that information, and pretty much you get the same card with another expiry date again. Now that frustrates citizens, and it leaves you not wanting to take part in the process. And in many instances, you're not getting the card immediately after you do this. You have to wait, you're told 2 weeks, and then a month, sometimes 2 months later, the card isn't ready. And then elections are called, you don't have the card, you have to find your name, or there were instances where there were mistakes on the cards, etc. So really what we want to do is have a simplified process, where once you are registered to vote. Yeah. And only changes should occur if you in fact have moved out of your particular constituency, which obviously then the onus is on you to indicate that you've moved, and therefore you want to be transferred. So outside of these very simple examples, our view is that the electoral process should be straightforward, should be simple, and that we should, for example, on polling day, we have places that are not accessible to people with wheelchairs, or to our senior citizens. So we have to make sure that we are able to recognize that the vote is so fundamental to our way of life that when we do have elections, that the places where people are required to vote are user-friendly, that it accommodates persons with disabilities, that it accommodates our senior citizens who may have some form of infirmity, and that we, for example, could provide appropriate accommodation like water, an internal place that people could stand and wait, so that if it rains, they don't get wet. I mean, that's the kind of challenges we face, where basically you get to a polling division, you're standing in the sun all day, no one is providing you with water, there's no place for you to sit if you were getting dehydrated, those kinds of things. It sends the message that democracy is not important, and that's some of the practical issues we need to address and improve upon. But fundamentally, we need electoral reform in terms of the law itself.
They may come across as simple, but as you say, it's real practical issues which must be addressed if democracy is as important as we say it is. We also note a decision just last week by your government that the school uniform program previously administered through the constituency offices will no longer be administered there, but rather at the principal offices at the various primary and secondary schools nationwide. Is that one of the examples of your assault against nepotism?
Indeed. Running the uniform systems through the constituency offices, and let me make this further point. Because the now opposition had won all 15 seats in the last election, they completely blurred the line, in my view, deliberately so, between the MP's office, that is a person who is a member of parliament, and the political organization's constituency branch office. And so there was no distinction between the two. And everything was ran out of the constituency office, giving the impression that the party, not the government, is the one delivering these social benefits to the citizens, and giving the citizens the impression that they should be beholden to a political party rather than the state or the government because of the services that taxpayers' dollars were being used to provide. And so we needed to make it clear that if the state is providing social benefits, for example, assistance to purchase uniforms or assistance to purchase books, that it is the state that is doing so, the government, not a political organization. And therefore, those services should not be provided through a constituency office. They should be provided through a state or government office. And obviously, we need to make sure that that message is sent clearly to our citizens so that particularly our younger persons are not fooled into thinking that it's the politician or the constituency office or the political party that is providing those services when it is the taxpayers' dollars that are doing so. And so we wanted to make it clear that we needed to put those services back in the hands of the persons who work for the state, like principals of schools. And there's another reason. We have to really make sure that we don't end up in a situation where people take advantage of the government resources and that persons who are not truly deserving of the social benefits and the help end up getting it, and those who need it don't get it. So the question will be, who is best able to tell you about the conditions of the students at the school? It's the teachers and the principals.
Exactly.
They're the ones who see them every day. They're the ones who will know whether or not this is a student who really needs help, or this is a student that doesn't need as much help as another student. And so a politician sitting in an office is unlikely to know that because he's not at the St. David's Roman Catholic School every day. You know, he's not at the Vendor Marcy School every day. So we need to make sure that the persons who are best able to make those decisions are involved in the process so that the right people benefit from it, particularly those who need it the most.
Absolutely. Prime Minister, I want to take a short commercial break and then we continue our discussion. I want to ask you about youth involvement in governance. I want to ask you about regional transportation, which is a biting issue. We want to talk a little bit about climate change and the economic challenges that the entire Caribbean region faces. You're in tune to Good Morning St. Lucia. We are speaking with the newly elected Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, a fresh perspective on Caribbean leadership. Stay with us. We'll return momentarily. Good. Welcome back and thanks for staying tuned to the program. Good morning, St. Lucia. On this Wednesday morning, we are engaging with the newly elected Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell. We say good morning to our viewers on Facebook, the YouTube platform, and also our viewers following on the Hot 7 mobile app. Prime Minister, let's dovetail a bit and discuss young people getting involved in the process of governance, youth empowerment, youth participation in leadership. It's always said that the youth are the future, but I tend to say that the young people are the now. That saying the youth are the future almost seem to be convenient and an automatic deflection of youth engagement as part of the decision-making process and structures of our current reality. Your own success as the leader of the NDC, taking over just 8 months before the general election and steering the party to victory at age 44 is indeed manifestations of the preparedness of youth to lead, not tomorrow, but now. What is your perspective on that current reality and the need to get more young people involved in elective politics?
Right. Well, I think the PR of my party, Mr. Romain, reminded me early on that I said the future is now. not that the youth is the future. The future is now. The future begins now. If you want to have a future, you have to shape that future now. Every second that passes, you've lost it. So I think that approach signal why I think the immediacy of action is required. But it's not just me. We have 3 elected members of parliament who are all under the age of 30.
One of whom I'll ask you about next. Go again.
Yeah, so I think that emphasizes that certainly from our perspective, the future is now, and the importance of young persons in the electoral process, in governance, and in shaping the future of the country.
Online, sir, and I know in Grenada and across the Caribbean, there's some intrigue over 24-year-old Miss Karine James, now the Minister of Climate Resilience, Environment and Renewable Energy, who was the youngest candidate in the June 17th general election. What's the story there?
No, well, actually, Miss James, has a lot of firsts. Not only, one, she's female. 2, Miss James was actually a senator previously. She had been appointed to the Senate even while she was even younger. But Karine brings a unique perspective. She's from Guav. Guav is a cultural and entertainment capital of Grenada. It's the fishing capital of Grenada. It's the capital that produces entertainment stars like Mr. Killer, the legendary track star Kirani James, our Olympic and world champion. So it's a village, a community that has always done Grenada proud, and I think Karine is simply following in that line. But it's the energy, it's the creativity. The truth is, and I don't mean any disrespect to older persons or senior citizens, but oftentimes it is young persons who bring the kind of dynamic change that you require to move you out of a place of stagnation. Because you have to have the energy, you have to have the stamina, you have to have the boldness, the creativity and the imagination to rethink or reimagine or pivot things. And so I have no doubt, given how important the environment, climate resilience, climate change, renewable energy is, that we wanted to ensure that we put that ministry in the hands of someone who has the energy, the creativity and the dynamism to push us in the direction that we need to go to address those issues.
Tremendous confidence, your administration in the talents of the youth. Commendable indeed. Does Grenada have a youth policy, sir? Do you envisage any adjustment in such a policy, if it does exist? And on the other hand, if indeed there's no policy, what would be your pathway to formulating one, and how much of a priority would this assume?
Well, we've had there's probably a policy for everything in Grenada. We have a national sustainable development plan. Our own party has a sustainable development plan, and the youth features critically in that as well. But that's on paper. The challenge we face in the Caribbean is ensuring that there's real integration of our young people in a way that is meaningful and that actually empowers them to create the future. But again, part of the challenge is the way in which our education system has not worked. And so when it comes to things like politics, our young people have not been encouraged to get involved in party politics or electoral politics. And so governance has not been seen as something that they should be part of. And so the crucial change we need to make is to ensure that, in fact, young people understand that if you want to shape the future, it is not just about your education, it's not just about sports, it's not just about culture, because you have to do those things as well. But you need to take part in the electoral process, because the electoral process ultimately leads to political and governance decisions, which would impact your life and consequently your future. So for us, one of the things we are hoping that will come out of this election cycle is to permanently institutionalize and encourage young persons to take part in party politics, not just have a youth arm that is separate and distinct from the main arm of the party that doesn't have the kind of influence on the decisions of the party. And so I think having persons like Ron and Karine and Tevin in Parliament and as full-fledged ministers will send the right signal and will encourage other young persons to get involved in party politics, to learn to volunteer, to learn about your political history, the civics, the electoral process, be trained in those things so that you can understand, you can have a proper career in that field that is rewarding and meaningful and that contributes to the development of the country.
What stands out for me, Prime Minister, in that last comment of yours is when you said there is great need to ensure that young people are really integrated in the process. it's not good enough to just have a youth arm of your party and then that youth arm is abstract to everything else that's happening. We really need to see young people part and parcel of the decision making. The matter of regional integration has been a major plank for potential and growth in the Caribbean region. The success of EC Dollar, for example, and institutions like the OECS and CARICOM are testimony to the importance of integration. However, sir, one will admit that integration cannot be successful if we can't surmount the challenges of regional travel, interregional travel. Why have we not been able to establish easy and affordable travel infrastructure, both air and maritime, between our islands?
Well, I wouldn't. It's challenging to do so. There's no question about that. But I think there's been a lack of willpower on our part to do that, and so it really does require our leaders now, and that includes me, to recommit, not to lip service, but to actually putting the resources into regional air travel. Now, in the case of Grenada, we subsidize international travel. We subsidize American Airlines. We subsidize British Airways to come to Grenada. And so I make bold by saying I have no hesitation in subsidizing regional air travel to and from Grenada. It's very important to us as a people, as we try and build our Caribbean civilization. It is very important to our tourism in Grenada. And so it's difficult for me to see why our previous administration did not see the need to support LIAT. I mean, now that we don't have it, I think we really, really understand the crucial role that LIAT played in regional travel, regional integration, fostering closer ties, and economic and cultural development within certainly the OECS. And so I'm certainly committed, my government is committed to doing all that we can to support LIAT or any other version of LIAT that can provide the services that we so desperately need for regional travel. To that end, I'm happy to indicate that, in fact, while in St. Lucia last Friday, OECS heads would have had a caucus, and we recommitted to redoubling our efforts to addressing the issue of regional air transportation. We have a follow-up call with the Caribbean Development Bank for the 2nd of August. And so we really are hoping that by the end of the year, we can come to our citizens with concrete proposals as to how we intend to address this issue. So certainly I'm committed. I know Prime Minister Pierre of St. Lucia is committed. We've spoken extensively on this as well. Naturally, Prime Ministers Gonzalez, Brown, Mia Motley in Barbados as the last three shareholders of LIAT, I think also committed to ensuring that LIAT or any other version of LIAT becomes successful within the region. So I'm certainly committed to that process as well.
We note, sir, the timelines. You said before the end of the year you will present real options to the citizens of the Caribbean.
Well, that's the hope. Obviously, it's not a decision that I alone can make. It's not going to be Grenada Airways. I hope we don't have to come to that. But that's the hope. I think we recognize the urgency of the situation. Getting to and from St. Lucia from Grenada was a significant challenge. Getting to and from Grenada to Suriname was also a significant challenge. And so it creates a lot of lack of productivity because you have a lot of significant downtime trying to get a flight, and then it's very expensive. So there's no doubt that it's an imperative that we need to address.
LIAT, you said, or any other version of LIAT. What's your preferred model, sir?
Well, I'm saying my model is a model that gives us planes and that services the routes that need to be serviced. So it really, I'm saying, LIAT has been with us so long that in a sense it's probably the impact of the branding that has me saying LIAT or any other version of LIAT.
Fair enough, but you will be batting for the return of the airline carrier, a strong option to interregional travel, both on the air and maritime side.
Absolutely, yes.
What options do you see available on the maritime side?
Well, on the maritime side, Trinidad and Tobago is leading an effort together with Guyana to explore at the CARICOM level the possibility of fast ferries that will allow a roll-on and roll-off services where people can actually drive onto the ferries with their vehicles and then drive off. So Trinidad is leading that charge. Studies have been done on it because it's not just the movement of people. Significantly, it's the movement of cargo. And intra-regional trade is also a major issue, particularly when it comes to food. And so that is being explored. And it's something that I think I'm optimistic that we'll be able to find the right prospects to make that happen as well.
Yeah, and we look forward to that. Let's dovetail now from travel to natural resources. So in many ways, our very existence and viability as small island states depends on the availability to effectively manage our natural resources. To what extent is this fact fixed within the psyche of our people and governments, and how is that understanding manifested or should be manifested in our own lifestyles and government policies?
Well, I mean, we live on small island states. One, we are susceptible to the environment, to climate change, hurricanes, volcanoes, storm surges, tsunamis, and then you add to that health issues such as pandemics. So it is quite clear that we are vulnerable to a significant range of issues that are existential to us. And so to that extent, we need to live in a manner that ensures that we can be resilient to overcome these events when they occur. We need to ensure that we protect our environment and that we don't continue to do harm ourselves to our small island states. So in a real sense, our very existence depends on how we behave, how we protect our environment, and what sort of future we want to leave for the next generation of Caribbean citizens to come. So in that sense, those issues have to be integrated almost into everything we do, from conservation to minimizing wastage to how we can recycle our garbage, etc. So even questions like our seed banks, we buy a watermelon, we chop the watermelon up and we throw the seeds away, as opposed to saving the seeds so that we can help contribute to our seeds bank. So those are things that it will require a lot of education, a lot of patience, but one cocoa fills the basket. Yes. And I think gradually we have to advocate publicly, we have to teach in schools, and then we have to lead by example in terms of our behaviors to make sure the changes occur to help preserve our way of life.
Right. So you have a very busy schedule. There's lots more questions that we could ask. There's a healthy debate on the online platform. So let's try to wrap up quickly. Crime and security, a major challenge across the Caribbean. What are some of your recommendations, and can it be addressed in an integrated manner as a region? Is there options for that?
Well, certainly I think so. I mean, I think, for example, we have the RSS, which we already have. But, I think in yesteryear, for instance, you would have found that within our police forces that police officers moved quite a bit within the region. I think we could look at returning to that, where our police forces are more integrated, and it allows for police personnel to move and work in different islands to help bring some of the expertise that may be needed to address some of the crime situations we have. I think there are policy issues that we could take at a regional level. Gun control, for example. I'm openly against the issuing of licensed firearms, except in extraordinary cases to civilians. I don't buy the argument that you're going to solve crime by arming your own citizens. All that is going to lead to is more crime. And I think the statistics show, for example, you can take Trinidad as an example, you can take Jamaica as an example, and then you can take the United States as an example, and then you can contrast that with Canada or the UK or other places where licensed firearms are rarely issued. If you are issuing licensed firearms, you are, in my view, creating more problems than solving them. And so I think we can have regional policies that talk about and have the debate, the pros and cons. But we can take Grenada as an example. We have very little gun crime, and I want to keep it that way. And so I think those are some of the issues we can talk about regionally. We also have to be very vigilant because most of the guns that enter the region come from North America. So the question of the porousness of our borders is some of the issues we can address regionally with the US to ensure that on their end they take stricter measures to prevent the exportation of firearms, particularly small arms, to the Caribbean. So I think there are a number of initiatives we can look at regionally, but I certainly think there is a lot of opportunity for helping each other regionally on that issue. Yeah. Quickly, sir, your homicide rate, what does it stand at now? I think I'm subject to correction, but I think we've only had 2 or 3 murders for the year. I wish we didn't have any. I hope you keep it that way, and I just like you, wish you didn't have any as well. The high cost of living and the economic situation, not just in the Caribbean, but around the world, a big concern for our citizens. What are some of the recommendations, and how can we begin to ease the burden on citizens of the Caribbean? Well, it's a tough one. The truth is we are importing too much. And as the governor of the central bank said recently at our meeting, we are importing the inflation. Because once you're buying your food from outside of the Caribbean, you have no control over the price. And we are not large enough to dictate price, and so we are price takers. So from a medium-term to long-term perspective, we have to grow and eat more of our food and produce more of the things that we need in the Caribbean. In the immediate short term, I think most of our governments are doing all that they can to ease the burden. In the case of Grenada, for example, we have a cap on fuel prices that has been in effect for the last 6 months or so. The effect is the government is actually losing revenue there, not gaining any tax revenue at all. The prior administration had implemented a 25% reduction in non-fuel charge on electricity. The power companies losing millions of dollars as a result of that measure. We are looking at potentially having a cap on the freight to honor about pre-COVID levels to see if we can ease the ultimate taxes that are paid by importers on goods here, so that could be passed on to citizens. We are examining that now, and we hope to make a decision in the next week or two. So we are doing everything that we can to ease the burden on our citizens, and the hope that this is a transient, temporary situation and things can normalize. But it does mean that we have to make some structural changes to the region, particularly when it comes to food security and producing more of the things that we need here.
Yeah. And my final question, Mr. We're looking forward to your leadership. I know many Caribbean citizens are looking forward to your leadership in translating the rhetoric into real action. At the OECS and CARICOM level, there seems to be a lot of talk shops. How can we get those talk shops into workshops, and what are your recommendations?
I like that. So I think one, there has to be willpower from the people who lead the islands. That includes me. And we will see very quickly whether the willpower is there. But I think we have to take a more project-oriented approach to getting things done. And I could take a simple example, such as the movement of people within the OECS. We've talked a lot about it. I think most people in the region know it's desirable, but I don't think we've really translated that to make it very easy. And I don't think we've marketed it to let our citizens know that it is easy to travel within the OECS. And so, from my point of view, it really requires the leaders to ensure that our immigration department, to ensure that our tourist marketing persons make it clear to citizens of St. Lucia that you can jump on a plane and come to Grenada without having to be, for want of a better word, hassled at immigration, and vice versa. And to depict that happening so that our citizens know that and know that it's real, and then could act on it. So that's just one example. I think if we take things like climate change and finding the development finance that we need, those are issues that we don't have to pursue as individual islands. Those are issues that we could pursue jointly together. And I think once our citizens see that we are doing so, the benefits will come. Or diplomatic missions, for example. We don't need to have individual diplomatic missions in Europe and Asia and so on. We could pull together and do so jointly. So I think those are some of the things that we've already begun discussing. So, for example, Grenada has its own mission in Brussels. Traditionally, we've done so since the period of the PRG, while other members of the OECS have a joint mission. We've begun discussing how we can, in fact, collaborate and perhaps have a single mission. So I think once we start ticking those little boxes, we will begin the progress, and hopefully we can demonstrate to our citizens that we are moving from the talk shop to the workshop.
Prime Minister, continue ticking those boxes one by one, and we wish you the very best in your mission to bring forth a better standard of living for the people of the Spice Isle of Grenada, and by extension the wider Caribbean region. Thank you so much, sir, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a wonderful day and a special remainder of the week to your audience in St. Lucia and Grenada as well.
Thank you so very much, Prime Minister Honorable Dickon Mitchell. You yourself have yourself a blessed and productive day. Keep running, and keep running the ground hard.
Thank you.
The Honorable Prime Minister, newly elected over in Grenada, Prime Minister of Grenada, PT Martinique, and Carriacou as well. The Honorable Dickon Mitchell speaking to me here on Good Morning St. Lucia Beyond the Headlines. So much more that we could have discussed. I know on the online platforms there's so much more that you still wanted to hear, but the Prime Minister has a very busy schedule, and we look forward to engaging with him again when next the opportunity arises.